Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. And, we're talking G.I. Joe once again this week. I know we got a lot of new listeners out there. Thanks for coming on board. I appreciate you guys. This is the podcast where every week I go over a G.I. Joe cartoon or a G.I. Joe comic book in sequential order in excruciating detail. That's right, excruciating detail. Page by page, panel by panel. We break it down. We give every comic book the attention it deserves. The original mission statement of this was like, not every comic book is Watchmen, but every comic book took a lot of creators, a lot of hours to make. So I think we can, instead of, a lot of review shows, which are totally fine, don't mean to slag on, but a lot of reviews tend up being like kind of wrap ups and like, oh, I like this and I like that. I try not to do that. I try to, we go page by page and we try to look at the panels and we look at the design and we look at, various choices that were, creative choices that were made throughout the issue and just see what we can come up with. And then at the end of the day, I say, it was terrible. I don't like it. No, I'm just kidding. I love G.I. Joe. And today we are covering 149. That's right, guys. We're just 6 episodes away from the end of the Hama run. And right after that will be the beginning of You on Joe, where the show will morph and we will be talking about you, listeners, and your experience with G.I. Joe and your favorite thing about G.I. Joe. So if you want to participate in that, please reach out and send me a note. You can reach me on any of the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, for now, Instagram, at Joe on Joe Pod. You can also send me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com, and then let me know if you want to be a guest on You on Joe. It's very easy. We just do it over the interwebs. And we will talk about whatever very specific subject that you want. That's the idea here, is like, if you have one favorite character or one episode that you just love, or one issue of the cartoon, or one issue of the comic book rather, that you really love, or an arc, that's what we're going to do. So we've got some stuff lined up already. We got to start recording them. So if you're listening and I haven't reached out to you yet, get ready, because I'm going to start reaching out. I think over the holiday, we're going to start putting out feelers to say, hey, let's slot some time in and get some You on Joe going. So that's really exciting. So while you're on the internet, you're checking that out. Maybe you're visiting our Patreon. We've got some new patrons over there, which I absolutely appreciate. You guys help keep the lights on. You can go to patreon.com/JoeandJoePod. It's real easy. Help support the show. Help keep the gears grinding and the hiss tanks rolling. And you can go and support our sponsor, the Movies in a Meal podcast. Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie. It's about not 2 movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show. And before we start our regular segments, it has been a good week for the toys. Well, good and bad. It's funny because the bad is everyone's credit card is just now getting hit. I've seen multiple memes about this, and they ain't wrong. But Hasbro is starting to ship, and others are starting to ship a lot of these toys. And today I just got my Operation Cold Snap expansion for the trading card game that came in the mail today. I got a notice that my Mindbender just shipped from Hasbro. The other day I got my Tiger Force Outback and Battle Android Trooper. I think it was the Python Android Trooper. So a lot of things are shipping. A lot of toys are getting out there. I think Serpentor is also on his way for me. So it's a good time. It's a good time, though. That means we're all getting a good haul. So I like that a lot. I appreciate it. And yeah, so that's it. Just wanted to say that.
You were saying?
I was. Thanks, Talker. So we cover this segment. We cover comic books and movies that were on the shelves and in the theaters the same month that the comic book in question was. So G.I. Joe 149, it is cover dated June 1994. And we're going to start over at Marvel Comics, and we're going to see what was on the shelves during this time. Avengers 375. Now, I don't know why or how the number 25 issues always became special in comic books. But they did. And it's always, I love it. First of all, I love celebrating anniversary issues. So don't get me wrong. I really love it. I really hate the modern trend of rebooting a series anytime a new creator comes on. I don't think it's good for the health of the industry. First of all, let me get on that soapbox. I really don't. I think it puts the creator over the character, which for the very vast majority of instances is not warranted. And I say that with all humility and love for so many great creators out there. But the fact is your name is not bigger than Captain America. And that's a random throw out there. Your name's not bigger than Iron Man. Your name's not bigger than fill in the blank. I prefer, and I think that the universe building is better when there's the continuity of a series. I know that puts casuals going, well, but I don't know where to jump on. Well, the problem there is then they really don't know where to jump on when you've got 150 different number one volumes sitting on your shelves. And it's constantly being rebooted, so there's no even not even rebooted, just restarted, and there's no sense of past history to encourage them to look back and pick up older stuff and see what they like. So, man, do I dislike that. I really, really do. So, having said that, and it also ruins the principle of random issues being good. So like, X-Men 137, Death of Phoenix, you do that today, that would be issue 50 of the series, and then they would reboot it, so on and so forth. So like just random issues being climactic simply because that's where the storyteller figured that was the right place to make it. I say all this as we're leading up to G.I. Joe 150, which certainly falls into the category of events, but it started out by saying I don't know why 25s, and I'm saying that because I don't know why 25s, 375s, things like that. When you hit it like 125, I don't know why, especially because comics for the most part were, for a large part, they're monthly. So you would think 24 would be the big date, because that's 2 years. Like, we've been publishing this book for 2 years, but maybe it's because when you go back, they weren't really monthly. They were, a lot of times they were bi-monthly or every 6 weeks. And it was, I honestly don't know. I really don't know the answer to this, but I think it's hilarious because it's like this, it's like trying to combine metric with base 10 numbering, like, what was the example I saw was Detective. It was Detective 526. I was selling this the other day to someone. It's a cool issue. It's got Batman, Robin, and Batgirl on the cover. It's got a all red background with a bunch of images, but like they were like they're color spotted red in the back. And it technically is correct. It's celebrating the 500th anniversary of Batman, but because Batman was in Detective 27, his 500th appearance in Detective is actually 526. So it's not even Detective 527. It's technically Detective 526. So like they were following, you know what I mean? So I love the vagaries of that. And I think those are the kind of quirks that I think make comic books great. And you tend to get away from that when you're constantly rebooting books. That went off on a tangent. I didn't expect it to be. But Avengers 375, they're wearing a lot of overcoats and leather jackets in Avengers 375. I have a full run of Avengers. Full run going back to like near 100. So I don't have all the early silver stuff, but like from like issue like 120 or 115 or something onwards, I have a complete run of Avengers. And I can't say this is a high point, but I can say this is a favorite arc. I mean, this whole run of Avengers is crazy and not like flashy, but just like Steve Epting's art is great. It's proto Steve Epting. I think he got a much better in later years, but you see just flashes of cool stuff. And it's real angsty. It's real X-Men-y, you know, and then they get the leather jackets era, and it's got interesting characters, Circe and Black Knight, etc. So I like that era of Avengers. I can't say the same for Captain America 428. It's Grunwald's nearing the end of his run. It's not great, and I don't know what changed, because he wrote some really, really great Captain America stuff, but it kind of got out of hand, and it got real 90s. I mean, so was Avengers, but Avengers was kind of fun for some reason. The Cap stuff, I can't say it was as much fun. We were talking about the Cosmic Powers series the last few weeks. Legacy is this week's, and this is the one with Genis Vell, Genis Vell, Genis, where Peter David's currently doing the series on. This is Mar-Vell's actual son. I like him. I always dug him. So he takes the spotlight in this month's. Excalibur's on issue 78. Now, Ghost Rider is celebrating issue 50, talking about celebrations. That's fun. There were so many. And this makes me think of that Midnight Suns. I'm looking forward to playing that game. The Marvel Midnight Suns games comes out in a couple weeks. I can't wait to get it. I think it's cool. I love XCOM, and I'm talking old school. Go back to the 90s XCOM, turn-based, alien fighter. The revamp they did was really, really great and 100% captured the spirit of what XCOM is all about, and then had really good gameplay. So if they're going to apply that to Marvel, I'm in. I hear there's a trading card aspect to it, which I'm not super big fan of, but we'll see how it plays out. I'm willing to give them a shot. The Hulk Future Imperfect trade paperback is out. This is how I read Future Imperfect. I heard it was awesome. I picked it up off the stands, and then I forgot that it didn't have the actual real issues for probably 15, 20 years. And then in my mid-30s, I realized I wanted to have the original issues, so I went and picked those up in back issue. But the Hulk Future Imperfect trade is out. Rick Jones gets married to Marlo in Hulk 418. That's a classic cover. Marlo, of course, like the 6'2" Amazon, awesome creation of Peter David, who she dated Joe Fixit for a while. And then she went on to, in this case, marry Rick Jones. And she was one of like the most fleshed out, great supporting characters, not only just of Hulk universe. I forget what her last name was, Marlo. I totally forget, but of the Marvel universe in general. Like you look at Rick Jones, who is probably the greatest supporting member who's not a superhero, and I say that knowing that he's had superpowers over the years, but he's not really a superhero. He's definitely the greatest, okay, rewind. Aunt May, J. Jonah Jameson, Mary Jane, then Rick Jones. Yes, I'm going to say that. I'm going to throw those out there. Of non-heroed people, I'll put them in that order. And maybe Mary Jane over Aunt May, but Aunt May, Mary Jane, Aunt May, J. Jonah Jameson, Mary Jane, then Rick Jones. Simply because Spider-Man's really all about his supporting cast members. But Rick Jones is great. You know, he had a run with Hulk, Captain America, Captain Marvel. Like, he's been all over the place. And when he married Marlo, I just thought that was great. But Peter David really fleshed out Marlo, and really she's a fun character. And in this Genus Vel series now, they even went and they retroactively, I think they resurrected Marlo from the dead or something like that. I forget exactly what he did, but she was kind of left in limbo, and he used this recent miniseries to fix that. So that's cool. So Rick and Marlo get married in Hulk 418. Hobgoblin shows up in Spider-Man 286. I'm sorry. That's Marvel Tales 286. And that would be reprinting the original Hobgoblin saga. Sorry, my eyes are terrible. I thought that was regular Spider-Man stuff. I don't want to mislead you guys. Something they don't do. They don't have Marvel currently, and obviously it must not sell, but Marvel currently doesn't have it. I mean, they do regular reprints. They do the big issue reprints for sure. So I'm not saying they don't do reprints, but they don't have a series that just does reprints anymore. Yeah, I guess those are all trades, but yeah, I don't know. They should look into it. Spectacular 213. So this has Typhoid Mary. This one also was released I think it was released in a polybag with a cassette tape for a rock and roll band, if memory serves. I've seen this book polybagged. I know I have. And I think it was like a promotional thing. Let's see. That's kind of, X-Men are doing their thing. Yeah. Oh, X-Men 33. That's a great cover. This is actually, it's a fun issue. It's Gambit versus Sabretooth, but this cover is great. It's by one of the Kuberts, and it's Gambit sitting on like a gargoyle ledge, and Sabretooth jumping behind him. It's a great cover. It's awesome. You see that, and you really want to read that book and see what happens. That's a solid X-Men cover.
You were saying?
I was. And now we're talking about DC Comics, cover dated June 94. Action Comics 700. That's a big daddy. I still can't believe DC rebooted Action Comics, even with the new 52. What a wild idea. You have the first comic that was going to reach a streak of 1,000 with unbroken 1,000 streak. And I know they did Action Comics Weekly for a while, so that kind of accelerated the numbering, but at least it was still unbroken. And you went and you rebooted Action Comics. I don't understand that. I get your commitment to the bit, DC, but man, what a crime. And I know they've reinstated the numbering, blah, 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 blah. What a crime. Because Action Comics hit 700 first, then they hit 800 first, and all that stuff. So they're the trendsetters. So why break that ground? Why break that sequence? So 700 was the downfall of the Daily Planet. I like Daily Planet centered. I like Superman, period, but I like Daily Planet centered stories. I think that's a strength, and I think when they adapt with the times, I think it's good. I think it's a good thing for the character. There's still plenty of actual reporters doing actual reporting stuff, so you don't need to necessarily ignore it, even though I know not as many people read newspapers. I think it's an important aspect of his character paradigm, just like I know they will, I promise you they will one day put the genie back in the bottle of his secret identity, and the sooner the better, in my opinion. But it's just a part of his one of the pillars of who he is. It's the whole secret identity thing. You don't know who he is. So now if you have him run around, everyone knows who Clark is, but then he's supposed to really go in and be a reporter too. That doesn't fly for me. So, not saying that wasn't a bad story to tell, Bendis, but let's get him back to being Clark Kent in secret. Or as Larry Hama would say, in mufti. Detective 675. We were working through Night Quest and Nightfall and all that stuff. And this is the debut of the post proto Azrael bat suit. So, you had Azrael, then he took over being Batman, and he would like put his bat suit together piece at a time. So one issue he'd have one giant gauntlet or two giant gauntlets, and then the rest of the bat suit was normal. And then he would put a giant metal cowl on, and then the rest of the bat suit was quasi normal. 675 was like the big debut of the as bat, like the quote unquote final version of it. And boy, was it extreme. And it was meant to be, it was meant to be strikingly different, but man, was it extreme. Just one look at that cover. That is an extreme Batman costume. Legion. Justice League has an annual out this month rather, and so does Batman Detective Comics annual. And this is the summer annual season for DC this year. Was Legends of the Dead Earth, or I'm sorry, Elseworlds. I jumped ahead. That was like 2 years later. This is Elseworlds. So this is Batman as a pirate in Detective Annual 17. The Justice League International Annual, I believe, was a little bit like Wizard of Oz, if memory serves. No, I'm sorry. That's a Legion of Superhero Annual. It was totally Wizard of Oz. The Justice League International one, I don't remember what it was, but they did it. But it's all Elseworlds. It was, if you're not familiar with Elseworlds, it's the DC version of What If, basically. And it's just other dimensional stories. So, but it's not necessarily it's not always built on the What If. It's not always built on like, what if Superman's rocket landed in Russia? That's certainly a what if kind of thing. Sometimes it's simply, what if Batman existed in, Victorian England, which isn't necessarily a one thing changes and the dominoes fall. It's more of just a different universe, and this is how it played out. So that's what the concept of Elseworlds was. So all of the annuals this year, they were able to do Elseworlds. So like New Titans got an Elseworld story, Robin did Superman got 4 of them. Batman got 4 of them. The Superman one, Superman Annual 6 is like Superman being Tarzan, which is fun. Which reminds me, there was a Superman Tarzan crossover with Dark Horse. It was really good. Just throwing that out there. Enjoyed it. Superman Doomsday wraps up with Hunter Prey number 3. Superboy is on issue number 5. Remember they said Superboy in Hawaii. I always thought that was fun. There weren't enough, really aren't a lot of Hawaii. There was such a great setting for it. They obviously everything's usually centered on New York. Occasionally you'll get in LA. Even less occasionally than that, you'll get a Chicago setting. Impulse, I really liked, was it Mississippi or Alabama? No, it was Alabama. It was Manchester, Alabama. That was always neat. I like setting them in when they do real world cities, when they're not mainstream cities. I always think that's interesting. It just gives you good stuff. And setting Superboy in Hawaii was great, because then you just have all these like beach scenes and ocean fights and really kind of cool visual adventures. So I enjoyed that. The Ray Volume 2. So this is the Chris Priest Ray series. Just a shameless plug. I have an entire run of the Ray up on my eBay store. So go check out Joe and Joe Comics over on eBay. Check it out. If you want to get the Ray, I got the entire run. It's going fast. I don't know how fast it's going, but it's going cheap.
You were saying?
Now, movie theaters. So, cover date of June, technically was April of 1994. And April 1st is one of the most insane movies that I never saw until pretty recently. And I recommend all of you to see it immediately. It's Clifford. Not Clifford the Big Red Dog. It's Clifford, starring Martin Short, Charles Grodin, Mary Steenburgen, and Dabney Coleman. Those 4 people alone are fabulous. And then if you're not familiar with this movie, when I tell you that a grown up Martin Short plays a 10-year-old boy, maybe 12, or maybe even younger, 9-year-old kid, without irony, just plays him. It is like a precocious kid who gets his his uncle, his madcap uncle in trouble. It's awesome. I love Martin Short. I think he's a international treasure because he's Canadian. I think he's a treasure. I think he's absolutely fantastic if you love him on Only Murders in the Building and all that stuff. But I mean, this goes back to Ed Grimley. I must say, I just have always loved Martin Short. I loved him in Inner Space. And Martin Short's fabulous. And Charles Grodin is, rest in peace, awesome. So Clifford is so weird and so great. You have to see Clifford. It is something to experience. I'm not saying it's a great movie. It is just such an experience to watch. These actors really commit to this insane idea, and it's absolutely great. Leprechaun 2 came out on the 8th, April 8th. That's right. More Leprechaun. He'll get your gold. On April 13th, the John Waters movie, Serial Mom. This is the movie that I'm pretty sure if memory serves, this is the movie that made America sit up and pay attention to John. He was doing underground stuff like Pink Flamingos. And what's the Pink Flamingos has some grossness to it, but there's one other big one that was just like, it was called like Wretched or Gross. And I think he had done Crybaby, which people loved, but when he did Serial Mom, that's right, Shirley, you agree. When he did Serial Mom, which had Kathleen Turner as a serial killer suburban mom, I think it was the Kathleen Turner part of it that like really gave it mainstream cred. And the great thing about John Waters, who is a national treasure, he never really sought that, like he was making the movies he wanted to make. Like I don't think he gives a crap if America accepts him or not. And it definitely shows because his movies are just pure his expressions and usually brilliant. If you've ever seen the movie Pecker, it's fabulous. But Serial Mom, I think if memory serves, Serial Mom was the one that really people were like, wow, what a great movie. And real went mainstream with him. After that success of Crybaby and stuff. Backbeat, April 15th, which is the Beatles kind of docu movie. Man, I listened to that soundtrack a ton. I enjoyed it. I haven't seen it in a long time. I'm not going to sit here and say it was really accurate about the portrayal of the Beatles, but I remember we listened to that soundtrack just an absolute ton. Cops and Robertsons with Chevy Chase and Jack Palance, also on April 15th. I'm not don't put me in the not a big Chevy Chase fan category. And I know Christmas vacation, but what about the golf movie and what about Fletch? Oh no, I'm not a fan. Surviving the Game though. Ice-T and Rutger Hauer, Gary Busey, Charles Dutton, F. Murray Abraham, John McGinley. This is the world's world's most dangerous game. Hunting men kind of a story. It's literally a remake of Most Dangerous Game. It's awesome. Surviving the Game is fabulous. On April 22nd, you have the female version of Young Guns, which is Bad Girls. Remember we talked. So they did Young Guns, that was it, and then they did the mobster movie that was like the mobster version of Young Guns. Then they did the Three Musketeers, that was the version of Young Guns. Now this is just the female version of Young Guns. Bad Girls. You also get on the 29th, you have No Escape, which is, I feel like, I have seen this one. It's like a futuristic prison movie, I think. I always every time I see this movie, I think it's more like Surviving the Game, but I don't think it is. It's been a long time since I watched it, but it has the late great Ray Liotta, Lance Henriksen, Kevin Dillon, Ernie Hudson's in it. Come on, Ghostbusters. We also get the movie PCU, Politically Correct University. That's a funny movie. That makes you chuckle. It's not great, but it makes you fun. It's chuckling. Oh, Zach Penn. I didn't know about that. I didn't know Hart Bachner directed it. Die Hard. Hart Bachner being Ellis from Die Hard. Awesome. Okay, and that's pretty much it. With honors, Came out on April 29th. I don't think I've ever still seen that. But that's got Joe Pesci as a homeless guy on a college campus. That's all I know. So that's it.
You were saying?
Oh, no.
Now, mass is ready.
There you go, Destro. So now we're talking G.I. Joe 149. A fun cover. It's got it's kind of cover I like, where it's illustrative of what's going on in the comic book. It's a scene. You've got Cobra Commander like a Bond villain or a Mad Frankenstein pulling a lever over the brain the brainwave scanner machine that Baroness is strapped into. Over his shoulder, you've got Billy standing with Dr. Mindbender, and they even give the detail of Mindbender's got a gun to Billy's head. Billy's in chains. He's kind of grimacing. He looks like he's smiling a little bit, but no, he's grimacing if you look close. And what I dig about this cover is, like, Phil Gossier went to the detail of drawing in the background here. You know, like, this is a fully, you know, it's a little bit of a MC Escher drawing, but it's a fully fleshed out diabolical lab, right? So if you look in the back behind Mindbender, you know, there's panels and there's windows and TV screens and circuits and, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's not just, you could have gotten away with just doing the Baroness and the brainwave scanner and Mindbender and Cobra, but he did do the background for it. And I appreciate that. So here's another thing. One of the things I love about comics when they do this is it feels like the comic cover is a window into what's happening in the comic book. When it's just as so many comic covers are more than ever these days, when it's just like a posed, really pretty, don't get me wrong, very pretty painted picture or however, you know, photoshopped up drawing of Spider-Man. Okay, great. But that doesn't feel like it's a window as to what's behind it, right? It just feels like that's a pretty cover. When you look at this, it's like it's a panel from the comic, which is made of panels. And so this is something that you're going to see inside, and not just literally going to see it, but like this is literally in the shape of a panel you would see on the interior. You know what I mean? Like it's the shape of the comic book itself that helps too in cases like this. So, you know, I'm old school. Get off my lawn. It says, inside, Billy turns traitor. Baroness gets fried. And the long-awaited return of Snake Eyes. What?
Yo, Joe!
Heroes and medals and things. Oh. Just had to turn another light on because I'm old and it's hard to see. Man, don't get old, people. Or if you do, don't let people know it. I want to do like an eye swap. Give me some young eyes. I don't care about getting old. I just want to keep seeing. So Heroes and Medals and Things. Script by Larry Hama. Pencils by Phil Gossier. Inks by Jack Snyder and Scott Koblish. Coloring by Shy. Lettering by Vicky Williams. Editor Mike Lackey. And in-chief Tom DeFalco. Pardon me, you heard frequent show guest Shirley Feeney chiming in with her canine interpretation of things. Yeah, so it's a really fun splash page here. You've got Flint in real action mode. And in fact, this whole issue is peak Flint. I love it. And he's hiding in some trees, shrubbery, with Lady J also hiding. She's in peak Lady J mode. And there's a Nitro Viper that, according to Flint, is so close I could knock him off his detonator without even aiming. What? And they're hiding. They're hiding kind of in the bushes near a Cobra listening post. And Lady J reminds us it's a recon. They're there to just like sneak and peek, etc. But the just the stance on Flint here is it's peak Flint. This issue is great Flint stuff.
Yo, Joe!
And I'm here for great Flint stuff. I enjoy Flint quite a bit. So next page we've got it's a wide shot of them. You just kind of see them in relation to where this detonator is firing, and that they're listening and they're overhearing the soldiers, and they're just trying to get a glimpse of what's happening until they run across a couple of vipers. And Flint takes no time to cut the throat of one of these vipers with a zash. He just takes his trench knife and I'm presuming cuts his throat because there's blood. There's juice. Let's just say there's liquid coming off this knife. It's a well rendered scene. So here's what's happening. They've got some panels that break it up, as far as the moments go. Them hiding, then you see the Cobras, like their feet walking where Jay and Flint are on the ground and so on. But then at the moment of action, it jumps to a panel-less image that takes up it's about half the page high, and it doesn't have any borders on it, so it's the frame of the actual page. And there's inks that are being speckled in the background. Presumably that's the blood of this viper getting sprayed everywhere. The whole thing is washed in red, so that goes to coloring the shy, doing the colors. So it's really cool. It's a great way to show what happened without showing the goriness of it. So it's not a necessarily gory scene at all, but it is jolting, and it gets the point across that that's a moment of intense action and violence. Just literally between the coloring, the breaking the panels, everything about it is it's actually really well told.
Yo, Joe!
And on this page, really smart stuff here too. So vipers, by trade, by nature, they're all faceless, right? They're faceless humans. So we don't, even Cobra troopers to a point, you could see their eyes, but they were a little more human than vipers, but they still had the face mask on, right? Lady J here, she's cornering this regular viper. And while we had this moment of extreme violence on the one page, Lady J is taking on this other viper. She's about to do the same thing. She has a knife to his throat too. So this is by no means, she's not down for, keeping the mission quiet. But narratively, what happens here is as soon as his face mask breaks, because she drops an elbow into his face and it breaks his shield, his viper shield. Now that humanizes that character. So as she's got the knife to his throat and he's saying, I surrender, that puts a moment of pause in her. And Flint, in this one panel, they're still coloring him with that blood rage. Like he's still colored pink/red. It's really pink, from the previous panel. And he's telling her, like, we can't take prisoners. We're behind their enemy lines. I'll do it if you won't. It's a great moment of tension and real high stakes that I was not expecting out of this issue of G.I. Joe. It's really cool. And it's further punctuated by having her break his face mask. It does not have as much impact if his face mask is intact and they're just holding the knife to like a faceless viper. It really helps that you see this guy's eyes go wide and everything. Also, Phil's pencils throughout this whole thing, and over the last couple issues, I like his pencils. This issue is really getting more like anime inspired. Anime may not be the right word, but like Disney-ish, in that a lot of really, really big eyes, so expressive eyes, are really doing a lot of the lifting for some of the character work. I really see it in this issue and this page in general. Yeah, Viper's eyes, they could not be bigger. But all this is interrupted by a helicopter.
Yo, Joe!
And incoming, it's the Cobra transport copter, and it's coming to pick up Destro and Mindbender, Zartan and Cobra Commander, or whoever wants to get on it. It actually, I believe it picks up Mindbender and Cobra Commander, leaves Destro and Zartan behind. So this is the page where we get caught up on what they're all doing. Cobra Commander says that he's leaving Destro and Zartan in charge of the operation. He trusts it'll be brought to a satisfactory conclusion. Basically, they just have to clean up what's left of Leader Krantz's people. They're in Wokluk land, or W land, as they say in this first page. Flint threatens the Viper to remember what Mr. Fudd said. He said, "Try to be very, very quiet." It's Wabbit season. And so then we get what I like about this page too is So this is cool. This first panel, they drew the full Cobra chopper in its landing, and then you have the Cobra Commander saying he's taking off. And then in this last panel, or the second to last panel, technically Lady J's the last panel, but the main mid panel, you have Destro looking upwards so that it's like he's tracking the departing helicopter. The wind is blowing his cape, so it's showing that there's, associating the helicopter with the wind. But his eyesight is directly tagged onto the helicopter in the first panel. So you're getting the effect of, exactly what he's doing, exactly what he's watching. You can see the thing he's watching. You're just not seeing it in the moment that he's watching it because you're seeing it on the previous panel. I dig it. I dig this choice because you're able to get closer to Destro and Zartan for a more personal experience with this as they talk about, how the annexation of Waklukland is proceeding, etc., without having to pull back and show the helicopter departing. It's the language of comics is telling you that it's departing. I'll say this, something that disappears when you read this digitally, if you go panel by panel, because you're not seeing the page in full.
Yo, Joe!
Now, on that helicopter, Mindbender and Commander are catching up. Mindbender's getting caught up on world news. So remember, we were at the we were on the satellite. The last few issues have been about the Joes in space, and that big satellite was coming down. And this is interesting. So the Russian shuttle lands. This is the one that the Joes cribbed and cobbled, or they fixed with their the Defiant materials. And Mindbender's watching all this on like CNN or whatever. And they get Duke, and Duke says, Sergeant Hauser, is there any truth to the rumor that the asteroid that exploded spectacularly was on a collision course with Earth? And Duke lies and says, absolutely not. The Earth was never in any danger. We were just up there on a training mission. Which is wild. Because I don't know why they would need to lie about that. That doesn't see, like, it's one of those things, like, and this is a good metaphor for life. Like, when you don't need to lie, why are you lying? You could tell the truth. The truth being, yeah, we did it. We averted disaster. Like, there was a terrible thing that was going to happen. They don't necessarily have to say that it was because a Russian scientist hijacked it and put killer androids on there. You don't have to say that. I think that would blow people's minds a little bit more. But you could easily say, yeah, there was. And we, in a joint venture with our Russian friends, went up there and blew it up, and we saved the day. And so there you go. But they lied. And so what does that do? It's a cover up. And so as we get Cobra Commander here, it says, well, Mindbender says something is being covered up, and Commander says something is always being covered up. We couldn't stay in business unless the supposed good guys were always covering something up, which is so true. It's in the darkness that evil festers. So when people with good intentions, genuinely good people, and no really good reason to lie, do so, all you're doing is making room for bad and bad intentions and bad things to creep into the spaces of truth. So, yeah, take that as a note in life. And this is something, just for me, like, the less white lies you tell, the less room there is for bad stuff to happen, because you're being honest and forthright. Like, just live in the reality of truth. And I know sometimes that can be really painful. So there's a little soapbox thing, but the truth of life is usually just so much better to live in than the little white lies of life. So I'm with Cobra Commander on this. Duke, I don't know why you lied to America. You lied to the world.
Yo, Joe!
In Transcarpathia, someone who's not lying is Billy when he's screaming in pain. This picture of Billy screaming in pain, as not a knock on the artist, this is excruciating. His eyes are the size of saucers. His mouth is like he is in a lot of pain, and it is a shocking image of a live human being because he is really, really in pain. We get an introduction to the Cyber Viper, which I had to look up. He's part of the later series. He wasn't on my radar as a kid. I kind of like the Cyber Viper. Like, it's kind of gimmicky, It's one of those later gimmicky ones. But in a world where computers were burgeoning, we were just getting the home PC market was flourishing, and the idea of cyberspace and stuff. You get your cyber viper. You know, his outfit's a bit of a hot mess. There's a lot going on there. But I was looking at the action figure. It's kind of fun. I gotta say. But he's putting Billy through the ringer here. And Billy's screaming, "You're not going to erase my mind. I won't let it happen." And what's cool is they give the Cyber Viper this personality of very much like he's been rewritten. I'm assuming that's from the figure. He's been rewritten like a computer, right? So he's very much like binary, like truth, yes, no, which is funny because what did we just see? We just saw a very human Duke choose to lie, and in here, one of the Vipers says, Billy must have gotten all of his tough genes. Billy must have gotten all of the tough genes in his family, making a knock on Cobra Commander, right? Another Viper says, yeah, his dad, Cobra Commander, got all the nasty ones, which is also a fun way to fill in the reader that this is Cobra Commander's son without being super explicit. And then the Cyber Viper chimes in with, genetic traits are not as divisible as you have stated. The subject has undergone substantial ninja mind training. The subject is resistant, but not impervious. And the Viper says, I guess they didn't solder in your joke circuit, huh? He says, there is no circuit by that name in my wiring diagram. So he's very honest. He's like a Terminator kind of thing. And there's something refreshing about that. And it's, I don't know if everything's intentional because he chose to write it, but I don't know if that parallel was intentional between showing that on this page, the very human Duke is lying for, your decision of no good reason. And then you get someone who's super cold and emotional, or cold and emotionless and computer, and is just like, no, that's not true. Because, I don't know if there's a bigger picture there, but I thought it was an interesting dichotomy.
Yo, Joe!
So the Vipers take Billy, they throw him back into the dungeon. This is the same dungeon that Scarlet was kept in back during the silent adventure way back in 21, and Baroness is tied up there. Sharks in the water, they're on their little ledge. They toss Billy down. She catches him. And Billy seems genuinely frightened. He says, I've had it. I can't take another session. Let them make a zombie out of me. I just don't want to hurt anymore. He says, I can't take it any longer. He says, what's the point of resisting? Who cares? And Cobra Commander's watching the whole thing. This is his son he's watching. This is wild. Yeah, I mean, CC's really lost it, man.
Yo, Joe!
So now this remember CC was on the helicopter, wasn't actually at the castle yet. So now he arrives to the castle, and this is a fun bit. We see Mindbender is literally measuring Cobra Commander. We don't know what yet, but he's got a measuring tape on. He says, you'll have to relax those pectorals if you want me to get an accurate measurement. We don't exactly know what it's for. And at that moment, they bring Billy and the Baroness to the commander, and Billy screams that she has a paperclip. She was going to pick the locks on her shackles. It's hidden in her hair. And sure enough, she does. So to us, at least, it seems like Billy's cracked. And that he's ratting out his one friend, the Baroness, so that they'll stop torturing him. Cobra Commander asks him, like, you spend a lot of time with the Joes. Like, you have any interesting tidbits, maybe about Destro? And he says he knows where all of Destro's secret hiding places are.
Yo, Joe!
Now, back in W Land, there's multiple pages dedicated to this plot. And at first, I was like, what are we doing? But then I realized, one, we're killing time to get to issue 150. So that's first and foremost what we're doing, is they needed to fill pages to get to issue 150. And it's the calm before the storm. But then two, it was just good character work. And it's doing what Larry does really well, which is build up these supporting characters, taking what could be, and usually to be fair, usually is kind of a pastiche stereotype character, because we don't, it's called G.I. Joe. It's not called the Trials of Leader Krantz. But he's embodying, he's giving them real backstories and real life. So you remember last issue that the second in command guy, and his name is, so there's General Leader Krantz and Wolfgang. Wolfgang's his second. he showed up with that gasoline at the last minute to then they could gas up their tanks and they could fend off Cobra. So he was like a hero of the revolution. So here Leader Krantz is giving him a Medal of Valor. Stalker says, this whole citation is a load of hogwash. The only heroic thing that little weasel, talking about Wolfgang, ever did was remember to flush. And they're kind of like just watching with general lackadaisical, like, yeah, you know. Except Wolfgang says, you know, Leader Krantz reads this flowery, he risked life and limb, and so I'm dedicating this to you. And Wolfgang is going to correct him. So it gives Hawk a moment of like, well, maybe Wolfgang's going to correct the, you know, not take all the glory. And then we launch into a multiple page retelling of how Wolfgang went and got gas. And it's fun. So the colors wash out and they go to yellow to indicate, you know, a different, in this case, a flashback, but just a different time setting. And according to Wolfgang's storytelling, it is totally fun. According to Wolfgang's storytelling, he crawled through a minefield under barbed wire while frag shells were exploding overhead.
Yo, Joe!
On the Darklonian border, he was faced with fierce Cobra troopers that he had to deal with an M60 and a trench knife, hot lead and cold steel. And let me add at this point, as one whose personal moral convictions preclude physical violence of any kind, I was subject to severe emotional distress for which I will probably require expensive therapy in the future. And then he had to convince the good citizens of Darklonia. And now this is where Larry borrows we'll say Wolfgang borrows the St. Crispin's Day speech to convince the people of Darklonia that he was a person to help and rally behind. Which is from Henry V on the eve of the Battle of Agincourt. Henry V urged his men, who were vastly outnumbered, to imagine the glory that they could achieve. So that's really funny. Apparently Wolfgang is versed in the classics. And then he led a caravan of fuel tankers back through the Cobra lines, and you know the rest. So Wolfgang's a hero.
Yo, Joe!
Now, Leader Krantz says, you know, tell him how you then saved my life after our tank got blown up. And so he continues the story, much to Stalker's chagrin. He says, I had to carry the good general through yet another minefield. And it's funny, this drawing here is absolutely meant to emulate Storm Shadow carrying Snake Eyes through the Vietnam rice paddy, carrying him over his shoulder back to the helicopter after Snake Eyes got shut up. So that's really funny. So he's carrying the general through a heavy minefield under heavy fire, and he lost his way in the smoke, and he stumbled right into the Cobra command post, where he encounters Destro in full regalia. And he says, give us the general and you can go free. And according to this memory, he replies with some hot lead. He says, not as long as I still draw breath. And he fires his M60 at Destro. It's really, really funny and charming.
Yo, Joe!
Not remotely true. Because here we say Flint and Lady J have shown up, and they have that Viper that they did not slit his throat. They have him with them. And Flint says, it's highly imaginative. It's almost as good as your paraphrase of Henry V. And he says they've just been behind enemy lines, eavesdropping on Cobra command post, and they overheard a conversation of what really went down. And according to Flint and Lady J, what he really did was Wolfgang crossed the border by bribing a Cobra Viper. There were no landmines or barbed wire. He bought the fuel on the Darklonian black market using soon-to-be worthless Wolfgang dollars. And then he was on his way to sell the gas in Barovia to make a huge profit, but he missed the turnoff.
Yo, Joe!
So he then found himself to where the Joes were at their command post by sheer coincidence. So maybe he's not the hero that he's pretending to be. And you even heard that, according to Destro, when they encountered when Liederkranz and Wolfgang did encounter Destro, Destro's response was take him back and let him make all the tactical decisions that he wants, because he's a terrible leader. Talking about Liederkranz, and the Cobra is better off with Liederkranz in charge than if they actually like took him hostage and a capable leader was running the military. So Destro said, no thanks, we don't want your leader. So now Liederkranz puts his boot on Wolfgang's neck and he says, give me one good reason why I shouldn't just have you trust in the woods, dragged in the woods and shot.
Yo, Joe!
So yeah, so we got, 4 pages of fun character bits, like, hey, we're gearing up for a big action-packed 150. Not everything needs to be high drama, right? So now back in the Silent Castle, Billy said he knows where, he said he knew where all Destro's hidey holes were. So there's a tunnel that didn't show up on the plans. So Billy takes them there, and it's like the ICBM launch place. Like there's like a missile control center. Destro keeps a couple spare masks, things like that. And as they get closer to the control panel, Billy leaps out of the grasp of the Viper, and he headbutts a launch button, I guess, just like a firing button for an ICBM. And we get an ICBM that fires up out of the roof of the Silent Castle. The drawing on the ICBM, while it's meant to evoke the missile like arcing and like launching at an arc in the sky, it's a little too rubbery for me. It's kind of real cartoony. It's got a lot of curve to it. But I get it. I get it. It works.
Yo, Joe!
So while that missile launches, some Cobra troopers doing their jobs, they launch detonator missiles to shoot down the ICBM. So when you get an ICBM getting exploded in low orbit, that's going to show up on radar. So way over on the other side of the world, deep under the Utah desert, Rattlesnake Speedway in the Utah desert, you've got, is that CoverGirl? Yeah, CoverGirl is replaying this to Storm Shadow. She says, check out this replay of satellite footage from over Transcarpathia. We've got an ICBM launch that was terminated by a SAM. Now, why would Cobra shoot down their own missile, Storm Shadow? Could something be going on in the side of the castle? And Storm Shadow is intrigued. I still feel like we never really got the, hey, Storm Shadow, America trusts you conversation. And I know this goes back quite a bit. He's been a part of the Joes for quite some time. But I see in Storm Shadow hanging out in the pit without Snake Eyes, without, just kind of on his own. That's bothered. I don't know why it's never sat well with me, and I'm here to say it's still not sitting well with me.
Yo, Joe!
So Cobra Commander is dragging Billy away, and he says, this kind of behavior is totally unacceptable, Billy. It's funny. It's, father correcting his son. But he does what, is not good, and he slams Billy back into the brainwave scanner. And really zaps Billy quite a bit. He really fries his brain. And in Cobra Commander's overly hyped vocabulary, it says, this obstreperous, I can't even say that, obstreperous, you work it out, whelp needs some immediate remedial cerebellum scrambling. And we see that the Baroness is smiling. So the whole thing of him ratting her out and all that stuff, that was a plan. So she says, he launched it, didn't he? He got one off. We really pulled one over on you, didn't we? And he proceeds to kick her in the face. That's a full face kick. I like that the camera pulls back. It actually, I think it adds more power to it because it like isolates him in this moment of violence on a she's not technically not like handcuffed, but she's still, a helpless, prisoner woman. So he's not only kicking a woman in the face, but she's technically a prisoner. Handcuffed would have been even more like damaging. And then his actual son is getting fried in the brainwave scanner. And the camera, by going deep, right, it just puts this, it like puts a period on the conversation, right? It just says, this is the man in whole. This is who you're dealing with here. It's a guy who would kick a woman in the face laying on the ground, helpless woman laying on the ground. Baroness is never helpless, but you know what I mean. While his son gets fried. Ladies and gentlemen, Cobra Commander. Like, I like that versus having it be close up and just maybe being kind of a gratuitous shot of her face getting kicked or something like that. The choice to pull the camera back, I think, really, really works here.
Yo, Joe!
So back in W land, we're still dealing with Wolfgang. Like, this literally, it's all about Wolfgang here on the Joe stuff. But it's good, though. It's good, and it's good. It's kind of bigger picture stuff because Wolfgang says, like, hey man, don't judge me. Do you think they being the Joes, care whether you live or die? Do they care about our motherland? They're here to enforce their own country's foreign policy, which is to say they're the protectors of their own national interests, which may or may not coincide with ours. Do they bleed for our homeland? Who are they to cast aspersions? How can they know what's in my heart? You know, and he pulls out this ledger and he says, yeah, I borrowed the money from the enlisted men's mess fund to buy the tank fuel. Like, but I kept a full account. You know, why would I do that if I wasn't going to pay it back? You know, and he buys he basically grabs the leader krantz. He says, yeah, I was going to try to sell it to Destro. It was a logical ploy to keep you alive. I was going to sell you to Destro. Like, they could have simply shot you while you were unconscious, but if they had paid for you, they would have thought twice about it. Fortunately, Destro had a brilliant and evil idea to pretend that you were useless as a commander. So this Wolfgang, super competent. I will say this, in this final panel, though, he's always been drawn small, but he's drawn like a dwarf. Like, he's just drawn like a magical elf type being. He's not the right size, but I get it. And it's again, this is getting real cartoony too. The very Disney eyes, very Disney mouths on this, but it gets the point across.
Yo, Joe!
Great panel, moment of shocked silence, speed lines. Hovering around, but not coming close to Wolfgang's face. And it's a moment of contemplation by Leader Krantz. And then he puts his arm around him and says, come with me, let's talk. And, as long as talk isn't a euphemism for a bullet in the head. And Flint is like, doesn't that just take the cake? The little weasel can sling jive faster than a quartermaster pockets a kickback. And Stalker picks up the book that he was waving around on the previous page. And while Hawk says, yeah, you got to admire him, though. Like, he delivered the goods and he did his job. But the book, Stalker points out, it's a betting book because he's a bookie on the side. So, no, he wasn't going to pay the money back. And everything that the Joe said was true. And Flint gives just this great, like, slap to the forehead reaction of, like, of course, which tells me I think Flint bought it a little bit. I do. Because I don't think you have that I don't think you have the reaction Flint does if you didn't quasi buy the plea for his life that he gave in the previous one.
Yo, Joe!
Get bullpens, bullet pin. Oh, you know what? Ooh. So this would have been the previous month. Jack Kirby had passed away. Yeah. Because this is continuing our month-long tribute to comics legend Jack Kirby. So Jack Kirby had just passed away. That's right. I forgot he passed away in 94. So we got a bullpen bulletins dedicated to the king. If you don't know who Jack Kirby is, that's totally cool. But I would strongly urge you guys to educate yourselves. Even if, like, some of the first stuff you look at, it might be a little off-putting. It was for me when I was younger. I wasn't a big fan of his growing up because I didn't understand it. I had to learn it. I had to learn what it was and what it meant and how much he gave to and brought to this language. And I'm a massive fan now. And I really, really urge you guys, if you don't appreciate Kirby, which, it's hard not to appreciate him in some form, but if you're not familiar with his stuff, take the time to really look into some of his stuff. And his early stuff. I wouldn't say look at his, 80s stuff like Superpowers and, his like the Kirby's World, whatever, like the third party stuff. Look at his, his Marvel stuff, like his Marvel 6, and all this stuff was good. His monster stuff was great. But his Marvel, obviously his early Marvel 60 stuff is just dynamite. It's just really, really strong work. And then obviously Fourth World, etc. Anyway, go on to the next page. And now we're in the High Sierras. We are just showing Snake Eyes' face now. I remember this was in a previous one too, where we weren't shy about showing it. We're really no longer, there's no pretense about putting his face in shadow. there is some just straight up scarring on, Snake Eyes' face. Like, we're not hiding it anymore. I feel like it should be a little worse. Should be a little, but I guess it's a little hard to draw that without getting super realistic, and we're still dealing with kind of a quasi cartoony style. But lots of nice detail on this. I like the serenity here. Snake Eyes is in a river, and he's fishing by hand. It's fun though in a moment and Snake Eyes certainly has a full belt, but Storm Shadow walks up to him, and Storm Shadow himself has 2 fish in his hand. So Snake Eyes grabbed one, and there's a little bit of gamesmanship where Storm Shadow has 2 in his hand. He says, "Looks like I didn't have to catch my own dinner."
Yo, Joe!
I don't know if they meant that as a little bit of games, one-upsmanship or gamesmanship, but I liked it. I took it as that. So they're sitting around a campfire, which is funny because remember his cabin got destroyed, so they went up there, and apparently, according to this moment, they're still living outside. They've not rebuilt the cabin that I can see, and they're not staying in tents. They're sitting on the outdoors. So it's Scarlet sitting around a campfire, and she's like, "Why are you here?" And he says, "I'm here to." The Honchos decided to give Snakes another medal for that last covert op, and this is a picture of a medal. It actually looks exactly like the medal that Wolfgang was going to get from Liederkranz. Storm Shadow burns the photo. He says, "If you live long enough and they declassify all the stuff we did, maybe they'll let you have the whole batch when you retire." But that's not why he came here. So Scarlet gets up and walks away because she knows he has something to talk to Snake Eyes about.
Yo, Joe!
There's an ad here for a book that I talked about, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, that I was saying it was a Hulk Venom one-shot that has a little bit of collectability, and I couldn't remember exactly what the deal was on it, but I know I had it. And what it is here's an ad for it. You could have got it. You had to mail away for it. Copies are $5 a piece, and you enclose. Oh, Canadians had to add 3. Sorry, Canadians. You had to add an extra $3. But it was a special edition to benefit the NCPCA, which is National Committee to Prevent Child Abuse. And so it's raising money for that. So that's what that Marvel one-shot was for, the Hulk Venom one. That's if you see it, grab it because it's a little collectible. Hulk Venom, and it's to prevent child abuse. So that's pretty cool. So Storm Shadow basically says, the bit picked up this explosion. I then turned on some secret cameras that we didn't know about, that weren't mentioned before, that they still left in Destro's castle. And we see that Billy he shows video of Billy being tortured. Storm Shadow says, "He was my protege. He's my responsibility. I have to go and get him out of there." Scarlet says, "And you want Snake Eyes to go with you? We're taking a break." And he says, "No, I have to do this alone. But Billy's going to need help and time to recover. We may have to go away for a long time. I just came to say goodbye." And then we get this quiet, contemplative look of Snake Eyes. This close-up of Snake Eyes' damaged face is what I would expect it to look like. The further you get, the less damaged it looks. But this close-up, and it's pretty extreme, that kind of just burn and scar tissue, that's really what I expect Snake Eyes to look like. So we don't see the results of it. Dollars to donuts, Snake Eyes going with them. I'm going to say this, though. Storm Shadow, just come out and say it. Because this is kind of BS saying, "I came here to say goodbye." Well, dude, they already said goodbye when they went off on their furlough to chill out in the Sierras. You could have just gone and got him. If you really came to ask him, will he go with you? Because you're going to need backup. Anyway, I call punks, Storm Shadow. I call punk. Just come out and say it.
Yo, Joe!
Now, in the Silent Castle, what we get here is a plot device to explain how we're going to get what happens on the cover of issue 150, which is Cobra Commander capable enough to actually go hand-to-hand with Snake Eyes, which is something that we've never seen, we needed. And it is Cobra Commander in a full-body, Iron Man-y kind of armor suit. It's close to it's skin-tight, but it's an exoskeleton thing. And it's a powered body armor that Cobra Commander designed for him, and it fits rather sleekly on him. It has to be unnoticeable under your normal uniform. So then Cobra Commander puts his regular hood on and his regular general's uniform on, and he asks the bats to fire at him, and all these bullets start bouncing off of him. So Cobra Commander is all like amped up to go, and for next issue, where as we see on the cover, it's Cobra Commander fighting Snake Eyes rather. So we've got letters here on the post box of the pit from Bill Quinzio out of Meadville, Pennsylvania. Adam Gordon withholding his address. Jason Profit out of Knoxville, Tennessee. Jay Kasmer out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then they give a special thanks to a bunch of Joes who wrote in. Sonia Foster, Wesley Carr, Kenneth Freeman, Alex Ramirez, Kevin Dirksen, Flash, Mickey Nasserin, Patrick, I don't know, there's a bunch of people. But couple things that came up in the questions is someone did ask, why was Dodger included? Which I was reminded of when that was an error in that last issue, a couple issues ago, when Stalker rattled off the dead. He mentioned Dodger. Dodger wasn't actually dead. So Dodger didn't actually die when Battle Force 2000 went. So they just say, it was Stalker was overcome with emotion. So, and someone asking is like, where's like Sergeant Slaughter and Shipwreck and Falcon and all the rest of the people that we really love? And they're just, it's because they weren't in the toys at the time. And here's someone saying, one, is Darklon really dead? This is from Adam Gordon. And according to them, yes, they killed off Darklon. And then we get the question that I've asked on this show a long-ass time ago. Why don't you do a what if with Snake Eyes versus Wolverine? Only Larry could write that. And I say yes. Could we get a what if with Snake Eyes and Wolverine? That would be awesome. Their response to this question is true, but no. Like true, only Larry could write that, but no. Snake Eyes Wolverine would be an amazing fight. I want to see it. I know you guys want to see it. Thank you for listening. I appreciate all of you. Hope you enjoyed the show. And we'll see you next week. Now this is Thanksgiving week. So everyone have a happy, wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm 100% thankful for each and every one of your ears, time, energy, and effort that you give to me. I hope it's worthwhile. Now you, Joe. Joeing is half the battle.